Welcome to the Tudor Dixon podcast. I'm sure you've all heard this, hype over Andrew Tate. He is a very, very evil guy. The Tate brothers in general have done horrible things. They have been under investigation in Romania and the UK, and even Ron DeSantis has talked about putting them under investigation in the United States. And I think people don't really understand how dangerous these men are, and Andrew especially. And so I have Danny Pinter here with me today. She's a leading voice standing up for the victims of sexual violence and the senior legal counsel for the National Center on Sexual Exploitation Law Center. She's recently taken on a new role, and she's representing Jane Doe against the Tate brothers. And this is so important. So thank you so much for coming on, Danny. I want to talk about exactly what is happening with these brothers and why this obsession in the media has sort of taken over, making them seem like they are great masculine men when they're really true abusers and evil men.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's definitely an important topic.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've seen this, and I have to say, on what I would say sometimes even right of center podcasts, and people who are in that space have brought them into the mix and kind of lauded praise on them and said, these are great examples of masculinity. I'm watching some of these videos of this guy. And just so people are clear about who he is, he's put out videos admitting to being a pimp, admitting to bringing women into his home. And what he had done in the past was, and I don't know, you can correct me if he's still doing this, he had a webcam business where he explained it as he would bring a woman into his life, kind of wine and dine her, make her fall in love with him. And he acted like this was a chore in the way he described it. Like, oh, I would have to have sex with them, and then they would be bonded to me in a way that they couldn't leave. So,
Yeah.
true mental abuse.
Yeah. So, he said something to the effect of, that was my job, to make a woman fall in love with me so I could put her on webcam and get her to give me all the money. And he said things like that repeatedly. He even sold a course that he called his PhD course, which stood for Pimping Hoes Degree. And what you highlighted is he would say in that ultimately this wasn't even about sex for me. I only had sex with these women so that I could control them. And he talks about that a lot, about mind control and controlling their minds.
Well, and we've seen this on Twitter, on X. We've seen all these posts from him, even in the midst of him being under investigation, talking about how women are there to have sex with you, to have babies. There's one woman where there's actual text messages between the two of them where she says, "Why do you beat me?" And he's like, "You're here for me to beat and impregnate." And yet these women still go back. And I think that in and of itself, that mindset, people go, why wouldn't they just walk away?
Yeah.
There is an abuse pattern here. He knows what he's doing.
Yes, he knows what he's doing. And he said he was an expert at this and taught other men how to do it. He charged men money to learn from him. So he absolutely is an expert at manipulation and creating those bonds. And it's very similar to cult dynamics. And this happens a lot with sex trafficking, where there's a concentrated effort, a strategic, intentional effort to create a very deep personal and emotional bond so that the person really feels like they can't leave. And Andrew Tate would even talk about isolating the women from friends and family. If she has a strong social group, you got to cut her away from that. So it becomes more and more difficult for the woman to leave and to even see what's really happening, right? To see the truth of the situation, because she's really believing this person. And he's definitely very charismatic and very good at this manipulation.
And some of these women are over 18, but there is evidence that he's been with teenagers as well, correct?
So in Romania, he is officially charged with sex trafficking a minor who was 17 at the time, and having sexual relations with a minor who I believe was 15 at the time under those allegations.
When you talk about how he does this, how he uses mind control to get these women, even when you go into the airports, you see those signs up on the bathroom stall. And if you're a man, you probably, I don't know if the signs are in the men's bathroom, to be honest, but in the women's bathroom, there's always a sign like, you can escape, you can get away. Or if you see someone in this position, say something. And it always strikes me because I think how many people are out there that are in this situation that I don't know about because he goes out on social media and becomes kind of famous for doing this. And I think women and in general, I wonder, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, if the American public is so sheltered from what sex trafficking is that they don't even see how dangerous what he's doing is. I mean, he's bragging about the money he's making prostituting young girls.
Right. Yeah, no, I think that's right. I think we still have a long way to go to educating people on what exactly is sex trafficking. I think a lot of people have this notion in their mind of the movie Taken and, someone snatched off the street or only in the immigration context. And both of those things do happen and involve sex trafficking. But most often, domestic sex trafficking, which I don't think many people realize, we have a very big domestic sex trafficking problem in the United States. Every single neighborhood in America has that problem. And what it usually looks like is troubled kids in foster care who most people see as bad kids, wild and crazy and maybe even criminal, but the traffickers see them as the perfect target and someone vulnerable who is looking for love, who needs a home, who is looking for a family. And the reality is they will give them that. They'll give them that feeling of love, feeling of being special. And it's a gradual process, but a lot of times those individuals, even with the bad treatment, like you said, even with, when he starts to implement the more the violence or the verbal abuse and other kinds of abuse, for a lot of those individuals, that trafficker is still treating them better than maybe their own families did, and some of the abuse in their past. And so I think that's what we need to understand.
Well, and one of my friends years ago came to me and explained to me that this had happened to her when she was a child. And I think that that was the moment for me when I thought, wow, this person lives right around the corner from me, a similar lifestyle, upbringing. Her parents were divorced. It was actually her dad who did it.
Mhm.
She would, and the crazy part is she explained to me, I never told my mom because I didn't want her to be disappointed in me. And when I was at my dad's house, I didn't want to make him mad and I wanted him to believe in me. So I allowed it to happen. And he essentially pimped her out to friends. This is
Yeah.
something that is so ugly. It's such a conversation that we don't want to have in the United States, right? It's
Right.
just so uncomfortable to think. And it was actually a moment where she said, I've never told anybody this before. I don't know how to talk about it. And I think this tends to come out for people who were abused when they were young, maybe in their 30s and 40s, start to go, wow,
Right.
that was really messed up. I need to talk to someone about it.
Yeah, I think there's evidence that the average age of disclosure for child sexual abuse, especially among men, for example, is like mid 50s. So it can take a really, really long time for someone to confront that because there's so much shame, number one, and there's confusing feelings because, like what it sounds like with your friend, is she still loved her dad, right? And that's what we see with the traffickers, and I think probably what's going on with some of the victims, alleged victims of Andrew Tate. There is these victims are in a position of loving the person that's hurting them, and they actually do believe that that person loves them, and they just might have problems or we're going through something, and they're telling themselves that narrative, and it can be very hard to break out of that.
Yeah, the one girlfriend of Andrew Tate in her interview, she says, people were telling me this isn't love. This isn't how people treat people that they love. And yet she couldn't get away from him. And I think that that bond that he creates, that manufactured bond that he brags about, and that to me
Yeah.
is the most disgusting part.
Yeah.
And that's what you have to watch for with your daughters, with your friends. I mean, honestly, when you see this happening, it oftentimes is what you think. But this was so much more extreme than I think we are even prepared for. And with social media, there's so much more opportunity because of what he explains with his webcam business. How much money do you think he was able to make off of these girls?
I mean, I don't know, but Decott alleges that as to one of his victims, just one victim, they allege he made, like, I think, about $2.5 million over
Good
the
grief.
course of the trafficking, and so that's just one victim. And in that Romanian investigation, there's two investigations between the two of them. They allege there's 34 victims.
Stay tuned for more of my conversation with Danny Pinter. But first, let me tell you about my partners at IFCJ, because Israel is still under attack. Missile fire has resumed from the Houthis Hezbollah and Hamas, enemies who are seeking Israel's destruction. But here in America, we can't even imagine living under the constant threat of terrorism and rocket attacks. This is the reality in Israel. I can't imagine it, but parents are taking their children to school and then falling on the ground, laying on top of their small children, trying to comfort them as sirens are blaring. The next attack against Israel is happening now with little to no time to prepare. So we need to act now. And that's why I'm partnering with the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews to help provide life-saving aid and security essentials. Your urgently needed gift today will help provide security essentials like bomb shelters, flak jackets, bulletproof vests for first responders, armored vehicles, ambulances, and so much more. Join me in standing with Israel. Call to make your gift today at 888-488-IFCJ. That's 888-488-4325. Or go online at supportifcj.org to give. That's one word. It's supportifcj.org. Now stay tuned. We've got more after this. So how does he become this icon on social media?
Well, I mean, he has charisma, right? He has a gift. He understands social media. He understands how to say what people want to hear and how to say things in a way that gets a lot of clicks, gets a lot of views. And, the irony is he used sort of the shock value of the webcam business. I think it's the very fact that couldn't believe he was talking about it. And it was fascinating. And so he sort of used that to gain his fame, but it's catching up to him because we have to look at those things. You can't just ignore them and say, well, those are jokes, now that he's saying maybe talking points you like. But the reality is that's exactly what he did, in his own words.
Why does nobody push back? I mean, I listened to a lot of those interviews and they turn my stomach. As a woman, as a mother, I mean, I think just as a human being, I listen to the way he talks about making money off of sexual exploitation and abuse. I mean,
Yeah.
and he openly admits that he abuses, emotionally and physically abuses these women, and that he believes that he can make them enjoy it and make them stay with him because they have this unnatural bond. Why? I watch these people who interview him and they're like just nodding along, like, oh, okay. And when he comes on, they're like, huge fan. What is there to be a huge fan? How did this happen to society?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the question for the day, and this is the moment. And I'm glad you're talking about it. Some people are. I think, whatever that ability he has to manipulate his trafficking victims, he's likely able to do that with other people, right? I mean, there's something about him. He has a charisma, he has a way of manipulating, and I think he's doing that to the American public through social media, to everyone, right? He's using PR and manipulation tactics to control the narrative for everyone, and it's leaving people very confused. And so we need to break through that. I think it's a really important moment. It's very analogous to me as the Epstein situation, but it's like with the social media piece. So, Epstein, by all accounts, actually was operating very out in the open. Most people in his circle did know what he was doing, but because of his influence, because of his charisma, they liked him. He made friends, they liked him. He had a lot of influence. He was doing things that people liked. They look the other way. So this is our opportunity to not let that happen again with someone. He says a lot of things that people like. And two things can be true. He can be right about the things he says that you like, and he can also be committing crimes, right? And we have to decide what we're going to accept. And at the end of the day, I hope we decide that no matter what someone says, even if we agree with it, we're not going to tolerate sex trafficking if it's occurring.
It's just crazy to think that there are, I mean, like, it's like the Charles Manson syndrome.
Yeah,
People were so charmed by him.
exactly.
People are
Mhm.
so charmed by Andrew Tate. They were charmed, obviously, by Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah.
And this is, I heard someone describe it as, he's like a tool of the devil, and the devil is calling in his favors right now. And really, I can't think of anything more damaging than abusing women like this, and more disgusting than abusing women like this. As I hear his stories, I just think, how does anybody even give him airtime? How is this not something that we're totally opposed to? And I think that is the danger of social media. Tell me a little bit about Jane Doe, because she has a defamation lawsuit against Both brothers or just both brothers, correct?
Jane Doe was, she's an American citizen who was rescued from Romania. So she was brought over there by Tristan Tate. You know, she was only there a short time. Almost immediately when she got there, she felt like things weren't right. Started talking to friends and family. A friend who is a United States Marine ended up saying, I have a duty now to report what I think could be criminal activity going on. He did that. She was rescued and cooperated with Romanian authorities. And for that testimony, that witness testimony she gave, the Tate brothers actually sued her. So she's been living in hiding since she was rescued from Romania, and both Tate brothers sued her for defamation, claiming that her testimony to authorities of what she observed was lies. And that's how they were spinning this narrative to pin all their troubles on her, to make her out to be the liar and, shame her and drag her through the mud and say, see, it's just this nasty woman. If it weren't for her, we wouldn't be in any trouble, and kind of gaslight everyone to thinking there aren't, 33 other victims in Romania. Even in that first investigation, there was 7 named victims. But that's what they've done. And so, I believe that was just an act of witness intimidation. And so when we could, and they sued the Marine as well. And they sued this woman's parents. This was a
My
very
gosh.
aggressive, in my opinion, abuse of the legal system. We were able to get the Marine out of the case, and another victim that they had sued. But her and her parents are stuck having to deal with this. And so Jane Doe has now countersued for what she experienced and alleging that this is a conspiracy to engage in witness intimidation.
So where are the brothers right now? I know they came back to Florida. Are they still in Florida?
Reports are that they went back to Romania and that now they are in the UAE, so Dubai.
And that was another thing that he was out there talking about pretty radical concepts about abusing women and using religion as a shield to do this, which I think is incredibly twisted. And I would imagine that there are people of that faith who would come out and say this is disgusting and this guy has no business talking about anything with our religion, but he got away with it, and now he goes back to Romania. But yeah, it's also interesting because when he came to the United States, Governor DeSantis said that he was going to use the full force of the law against them. And there were some people who came out and said, they were against the governor. And pretty quickly, there was a lot of backlash from elected officials who were like, what the heck is going on? How did that affect you in your case?
Well, to Jane Doe, it was the one thing that was like the light in all of this, right? Seeing the Tate brothers come to America was terrifying. It felt like intimidation. It felt like, they can do anything. They're going to get away with it. She's been living in hiding for years, and they're accused of these horrible crimes. They're suing her, and now they're, free to travel. It was scary. It was very scary. And so to see Governor DeSantis act swiftly and decisively and to say what I believe is the right thing, which is, these individuals are accused of really terrible crimes. We're going to investigate that. If they did anything wrong in Florida, we're going to investigate it. And they're not welcome. I think that was the right thing to do. And it really made Jane Doe feel safe. And I think that's the kind of strong leadership we need on these issues.
Do you think that's why they went back to Romania?
I don't know. We don't know. They say they went back because they had a scheduled date to go back and they were complying with that. So I guess we can take them at that.
And they have a civil complaint against them now.
Yes. Oh, yeah. So while they were here, a young woman has alleged that. So they left Romania where they're charged with all these crimes. They come to America, sort of baffling everyone how they were able to do that. They come here, and now a young woman has said that while in America on U.S. soil, she was abused by Andrew Tate. She alleges that he strangled her almost to the point of unconsciousness and beat her, and was again, telling her or asking her to do OnlyFans for him. So that's just mind blowing, if that's true, that so brazen, to just keep doing that. And I think that as Americans, we should be very concerned about that.
So they still have a business going on.
Well, we don't know, but according to what her testimony is, that's what it looks like.
And the way he describes this business, I think that people should understand is that he called the woman a bottom B. And I'm assuming the way I understood what he was describing is almost like this is like the what we imagine, Ghislaine Maxwell to be,
Yeah,
kind
I
of.
mean, that's classic street prostitution pimping terminology. I mean, if you ask
So what
any
does that
law
mean?
enfor
'Cause
Yeah, yeah.
that's not terminology I'm familiar with.
Yeah, any law enforcement officer investigating these crimes would know what that means, but exactly, it's a very common tactic, and it's what Ghislaine Maxwell did. It's where the trafficker uses a woman to help accomplish his trafficking. Oftentimes, she's the enforcer, she's the go-between, she's the recruiter, because then she can kind of vouch for the man if say, "Oh, no, it's great. I love it. He's great." So it's very insidious, and it's also very common.
So the way he describes her is she is like the original woman that he tells he loves. But even the way he describes her is that he doesn't love her, that
Right.
he has her manipulated as well. And he lauds himself as this master manipulator. I mean, he doesn't hide the fact that that people fall in love with him because he's used these tactics and he can teach other men to use these tactics to manipulate women. And almost the way he talks about it, almost he's disgusted by them. That's the bizarre part about it. And I will say that he's made multiple comments on social media about having sex with men and the interest in having homosexual sex, and that makes you really manly if you can do that. And so there's this question of like, what is the mindset of the Tate brothers for real? Like, how do they really even identify? We don't know. And the funny part about that is here are people bringing him in as like this ultimate male figure in a woman's life. And I'm like, potentially he's gay. So that's weird. But then he also talks about this woman who he has control over, the Ghislaine Maxwell figure in his life. He says she has to stay because he has sex with her. And she's like the original, and she knows that she has to share him, but that she gets part of the benefit of being with him because I guess there must be a massive amount of money coming in. How does that person not eventually turn? I mean, how do they get into the minds of women? And I imagine that they're one of the only groups that is publicly saying this, but there are plenty of people out there like the Tate brothers who have this system going on.
Yeah, there are. And so, I mean, the allegations in Romania are that woman was groomed and trafficked as a minor by Andrew Tate. So I think that kind of
Mm.
answers part of the question, which is that she's been with him since she was so, so young. And he talks about that, basically he's brainwashed her and the attachment is so strong that she will never leave. He brags about that. And to your question, this happens all the time. So there's trauma bonding that goes on in these trafficking situations where if you experience a level of tragedy and a level of abuse with someone, you'll see this in domestic violence too. It's like the more and more heightened that abuse is, and you stay, and there's sort of like a rebonding after that. It becomes harder and harder and harder to leave because you've invested so much. There is such a strong emotional bond, and there's an almost impossibility to believe that there could be a life outside of that. And that's a lot of what he talks about too, is that you create this situation where they can't imagine anything else. There's really nowhere else for them to go. And in some trafficking situations too, after like years of abuse, these women are almost relieved to not be doing what the women below them are doing. So there's also kind of some of
Mhm.
that. It's like taking back some of the power and a little bit more of a privileged lifestyle. So there's a lot of dynamics going on with that.
In these videos that he had out there, these multiple videos, is he also the star of these videos, or do they bring men in, or what exactly happens in this business?
So it seems like with the webcam OnlyFans, it's solo. So I think the women are doing sex acts on camera to like a live male audience. That's what the description sounds like to me.
It's not as though people don't know about this, though, because people as famous as Kim Kardashian finds out Kanye West is hanging out with the Tate brothers while the kids are there. She calls an emergency hearing. I mean, this is well known. Why can there not be something done? Why are they not behind bars in the United States?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a question for us to ask our elected officials and our government. I think the Tate brothers are United States citizens, which they loudly proclaim as having all these rights as American citizens that they deserve. And the other side of the coin is you also are subject to United States laws. And under the United States laws, if an American citizen commits sex trafficking abroad or abuses minors abroad, you could be prosecuted for that here. So I certainly hope and I believe that our American justice system will do the right thing. We do have the strongest laws against these kinds of sex crimes, if anywhere in the world. So, I think it's just a matter of time, in my opinion. But I think we should hold them accountable. We should ask for that.
When you see people that are having him on their podcasts and giving him airtime, what would you say to them?
I would question why they are helping and facilitating sort of this false narrative that's doing harm. Because I think that's the biggest issue is, it's almost proven that whenever Andrew Tate goes on this podcast, he says things that aren't true about the case, about the victims, about what he's accused of. And it's so easy to verify. So why are you as the person providing him that space, you're giving credibility to that when you don't push back and challenge and you put your brand on that. It's what confuses everyone. You're actually assisting him in confusing and lying to people, right? Because at this point, right, we have so much information coming at us. We think we have some trusted sources, right? We have a podcaster that we like and we feel like we trust. So we're not going to go fact check everything they say. So now when that podcaster lets a guest come and lie unchallenged on the podcast, I think that podcaster is responsible for the damage they've done to their audience and lying to them and to spreading false narratives.
Right. I think that's the most important thing to remember is that we have so many sources of information right now, but those sources of information don't necessarily always have to be fact checked. And you should make sure that you, especially in a subject like this, should make sure that you're getting the full story, the right information. States across this country are dealing on a daily basis with sex trafficking. It's one, I mean, the United States is what, second in the world for sex trafficking?
I think that's right. I don't know for sure.
I believe we're second in the world for sex trafficking. So to me, first off, it's shocking that these
Yeah.
guys can have these charges against them, come into the United States and just live freely. I agree with you there. I think it's totally appalling. Are they still under investigation in these other countries? And what is the status of that?
Yeah, so they're still under judicial control in Romania, so those cases are still open and ongoing. But I think it is strange that they're able to travel so freely now. I think we should be confused about that. Something weird is going on. And there is also a criminal investigation happening in the UK. So open criminal charges for which the UK did seek extradition in Romania, and it was granted by a Romanian court. So technically that order still stands, but what it said and is as usual is we will extradite when we're done with our case, right? But I don't think the UK expected Romania to allow them to freely travel. So I think we're at kind of a weird spot where I would expect the UK to take some action now. They should also be concerned that the Tate brothers are traveling. And I would think, considering they have these allegations going back to 2012 in the UK, this is, there was a criminal investigation in around 2015 of 3 or 4 women that came forward. They allege that the UK kind of dropped the ball then in failing to prosecute those crimes. And now we have another investigation with different victims that goes back to 2012 to 2015. So in some sense, the UK is responsible for not having done the right thing then. That's gotten us to where we are now. So I hope the UK does the right thing now. They've been under fire for failing to prosecute very serious sex crimes for some time now. I think this is their moment to do the right thing and get a little aggressive if they're going to seriously prosecute these crimes.
Well, for anybody out here that's listening to stories about Andrew Tate, understand this is not masculinity. This is abuse. This is certainly not biblical. This is the opposite of that. This is pure evil. The Tate brothers and what they've done. I would say that we have to assume, but they've openly put out there what they've done. They're caught on video beating women. I mean, and they're proud of what they've done. This is not something you have to really wonder about. If you are wondering about it, if you just simply take 5 minutes to look at it, this is the kind of dangerous person that's out there. And this is what we should be fighting as a country. And I think we've seen some of this become accepted in different areas. I mean, I think the UK has been sort of a problem when it comes to abusing women. We've seen a lot of women be abused. I mean, we're seeing women being abused in Sweden now, and there's nothing being done about it. Seeing women being abused in the United States, like I said, being the second in the world for sex trafficking, I think we need to have our elected officials do a heck of a lot more. I know in Donald Trump's first term, I had talked to people who were fighting sex trafficking, and they felt like the Trump administration really had their back and really was supporting going after sex trafficking. I believe that those people are back at it again, fighting sex trafficking. I'll give our attorney general in the state of Michigan, who I don't agree with on much, but she is out there on a regular basis talking about the importance of fighting sex trafficking. And I can certainly agree that that is something we must do. This is the kind of stuff that destroys society, but these poor women's lives, it's just, you never get back what you had before. You end up with someone like this who's taken so much from you. And we appreciate everything you do to fight this. Danny Pinter, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Thank you so much. And thank you for talking about this.
Absolutely. And thank you all for listening to this and listening to the Tudor Dixon podcast. For this episode and others, go anywhere you get your podcasts, the iHeartRadio app or Apple Podcasts, wherever you get them, and visit us next time on the Tudor Dixon podcast. Have a blessed day.